we will commence with the masterclass. Thank you so much.
You used to come to school for school trips?
For school trips here at the zoo.
Right.
And I remember distinctly that every time we'd be in the bus and we'd be singing and it would be hectic in the bus, as soon as we enter the suburbs, the teachers would say, shh, shh, white people don't like noise, you know. And I used to get so amazed at these white people who did not like noise, and certainly from school kids who were singing so beautifully, you know. But the thing is, I'd go home and I'd say to my mom, Mom, do you think that one day I'll live there? And her answer, which I find to this day to be truly empowering, was, you never know. It's amazing what time and choices affords you in life. Every time I look out my office, I just am always amazed that at some point I couldn't even dream of being here without my voice not being heard, and now I'm influencing decisions around this area, which is amazing. It's actually shaping the mind to have intentionality, because sometimes we arrive at places and we never had the intention, we never had the foresight, we never had the vision, we never understood ourselves in the context of the problem. And so we end up wasting the opportunity. I think everything in life is earned. Our time in place, our time in this space, and has to be earned. You can't just, it's not a free ride. You don't just arrive. There we go, Funda Center. So we were chosen at the school to come to Funda Center for extra lessons. A medic student who every Saturday without fail would come and teach. I can't believe this is Tabajabula. And if you were late, you'd kind of stand around here until you're called in to the assembly. But that was the hall. We used to come there. And look, it was only established 1979. Oh, nostalgic. Very nostalgic. We were the only two that were punished. The rest were leaving, but we were the only ones that got a beating. It's so funny. Sometimes people see something in you. They're like, you are not going to be out of line. Right or wrong, they'll leave others, but they will make sure you don't get out of line. It was incredible. This used to be the school. They demolished it. You only have one point in life, but you can do so much if you have foresight, and you can use your energy differently. How did we get here where things sometimes don't work? And there are so many of us that could do something. And that's a guilt one has to live with. That's the unfulfilled. You look at your life and you say, some of it, you had ability to change lives and you didn't. And you've got to take stock of that and learn with it. There could have been. But it doesn't have to be the could have been for life. You can
always change it around.
You can always change it around. I worked in the butchery. The butchery was here. I was the cashier and I had two people reporting into me. So the police were chasing us with horses. They had come with horses now. And we ran into one of the homes here. The young boy said, come, and we got in. But it was so scary, running into somebody's home. You don't know them, they don't know you, but you're running away from the army because they're now all over. There are a couple of things that sometimes stop good people from doing things. The first one is futility. It's like they think, you know what, my contribution won't count anyway. Why is it that we're accepting that this is the end state for us and actually be almost proud of it? Because we were never made to be comfortable with
where
it.
you are.
No. Why can we not also say we come from our beautiful country and we're not strugglers? And if we are not driving that in our own minds, then we accept that lack of access, have to feel lack of. Why? Acceptance is comfort, and there's nothing growing out of comfort.
Now, it's not every day that you get to introduce a speaker who wears so many hats: an executive, an entrepreneur, a community leader, a coach, and most importantly, a Black South African female who is deeply committed to seeing her country rise with purpose and with heart. Today, we're incredibly privileged to be guided in thought by a leader who not only sits at the wheel at many major institutions, but also stands firmly rooted in her values and community. Ms. Angela Mhlanga is no stranger to boardrooms or balance sheets, but her leadership extends far beyond profit margins. She is a leader who sees the economy as a living, a breathing network of people, power, and potential. Her journey started in a family-run butchery in Pimville, Soweto, at the age of 12 years old. She was already learning how business works, but not just the transactions, it was the grit and the community behind it. And that experience still echoes in the way that she leads today. She has led the highest levels of South Africa's financial services sector, yet her lens remains that of a citizen deeply invested in transformation of the people, the structures, and most importantly, the mindsets. Today, she's here to challenge us, to spark urgency, and to invite us into a meaningful exploration into her session, South Africa's Opportunity to Lead with Purpose and Invest with Heart. She will take us into the DNA of our country and our country's economy, how it was built, who it benefits, and what needs to be shifted. She'll draw our attention to the role of business as a powerful force, one that can either perpetuate inequality or it can drive intentional and meaningful change. She'll speak about the strategic allocation of capital, the untapped potential of the township economy, and most importantly, your role as young people as agents of change. Ms. Angela believes that leadership is more than the title that you hold. It's about the courage to question the system and mainly the heart to reimagine it. Everybody, please help me to welcome a powerhouse of wisdom and of authenticity, Ms. Angela Mhlanga. Another round.
I thought that was the initial round of applause was sufficient, but thanks, Grace. And thank you again for a very warm introduction. Wow, I was sitting there thinking, who the hell is that? And really thank you again for supporting me in preparing for this session. Your professionalism and your conscientiousness is truly amazing. I'm very grateful. And I just want to also acknowledge Josh. I don't know where he is. He might be around here, but the guy who's been walking around filming, he supported me to actually do my best here this morning. So thank you very much to him in absentia. So you recognize one thing, that Lincoln called a whole lot of people to come talk, and he said it's a masterclass. Now that is very intimidating because I'm certainly not an academic, I'm certainly not a specialist, I'm a generalist at best. And so what you're going to get are just my thoughts that keep me pondering and asking, how do I share this with people in a way that it makes sense? So I hope that you allow me to let you into what's been happening in Angela's mind, questioning where we're at as a country and what we need to do about it, right? Because it's quite easy to kind of listen to newspapers and the like, and then you get lost in the noise of it, and you actually also wonder what's your part in it. So I'm hoping to share just some of where my thoughts have been and how I've looked at my part in all of this. So I titled this talk South Africa's Opportunity, which I believe lies in the heart of leadership in this country and the resources that we have. And I believe that if, as a country, we start actually optimizing that, we will go so much further in terms of growing the potential of this country. So the question I often ask is there a way in which we can invest in purpose? Yeah? We spend about 10% of our GDP on fixed investment in this country. So both corporates and government spend money to invest. The bulk of it is basically corporates and us investing. When you buy unit trusts and the like, that money also goes into investments in the country. But the government will spend about 30%, government and SOEs, and the rest of it is actually the corporates and us. And the question is, how do we utilize this money in a way that actually we shift the dial? I don't think this is the ultimate state. Imagine if 50 years from now, we gift this to our grandchildren and we say, that's a legacy we've built for you. I don't think that's what any of us, regardless of color, creed, race, whatever, right? I don't think this is what we want to end at. So we need to be a little bit more purposeful with what we're doing in terms of investing. I think that all of us, at our heart, at our gut, we want to change how the country is set up. I drew that triangle as a visualization to say, at the moment, what we have is the majority of the people in this country earning less than 5,000 rand. Just think about it. What do you do with less than 5,000? In fact, it's far less for some, yeah? And then the rest, all of us here are middle class and above. In fact, a lot of us are actually defined as upper income if you're earning above 22,000 rand. But the majority of the people are earning far less. I would like to believe that our future needs to be a diamond, at least, where we actually have the most of the people in this country at least being above middle class, being middle class and above. That sounds like a lot more sensible. We really have a very high level of inequality in our country. And in fact, we're probably one of the highest in the world, yeah? The beauty about changing this kind of trajectory is that it actually will improve how the very thing that we sometimes see and we worry about, when you have political the way that we have unrest, etc., we become unstable. Because you think, okay, you know what, I've graduated, I've bought my townhouse, I live well, but I can tell you now, you will not rest until everybody in this country is actually uplifted, because there'll always be unrest, there'll always be discontent, there'll always be somebody who is going to threaten your livelihood because they're starving and you're the only one who is actually living well. So that kind of setup does not make sense. We need to actually work towards improving that. So where's South Africa now? A lot of it I've already spoken about the inequality. But I want to stress the duality of our economy, which is something that we enter into the workspace not thinking about, yeah? The duality of our economy talks to the fact that you've got one very formal economy. It's got capital, it's filled with large corporates, it's got access to markets outside of this country, there are high wages that are earned there, it's highly regulated, that's one form. And then there's the other, the informal one, right? Where they're very low wages, the people are marginalized, no access to the markets that we're talking about, and it's largely excluded from the benefits of growth. Yeah? In fact, we don't even track it. This is the irony of it. When we talk about other things happening in the country, we don't report on the township economy. It doesn't even get airtime on TV. Why? Because it's that thing, that it's almost like Africa in the world. They don't talk about us, but we exist, right? That's exactly what we do with the township economy, or economies that are previously excluded. We all know about the high unemployment. I'm not going to talk much about it. But I think the important aspect to realize about our country is that it's very export orientated. And that is actually fundamentally as a result of where we've come as a country. Yeah, you'll hear the mining industry will tell you about battling with beneficiation. Because a lot of what we started doing in the past was actually take what we had and export it. We depended a lot on exported skill set and exported expertise in terms of actually doing better with the stuff that we produce, right? So there's lots of work that's being done around how to utilize minerals, etc., etc. A lot of it sits outside of our country than inside. So we sell everything, we buy it more expensive, kind of. That's what we do. And then obviously we've got SOE debt, which you all know about, that we've got a lot of debt in our SOEs. But one thing perhaps we need to remember with the SOE debt is that a lot of it also comes from actually doing unmandated work. Like to electrify this whole country. Every single person. Remember previously the SOEs were doing work for just a marginal part of the country. Now they have to do for everybody. And some of that needs to be funded by somebody. Yeah. And lastly, the challenge with infrastructure, electricity and water and the like, In the past 30 years though, there's been some things that have been happening that I don't want us to dismiss. Because if you recall, when we got to democracy, and we all agreed, that we are one country, we had to now move, because this is something we must never forget. We didn't say, no, we're moving blacks only. No, we decided we're moving together, right? Because that's what we believe this country is about. We decided that, we're going to try and make sure that we uplift black people as far as the economy is concerned, right? So we've had quite a few successes. We've had a few large owned companies. I think the number could be far more, because if I asked you which large corporates do you know that are fully black owned and founded, you wouldn't necessarily call them out, yeah? And many are still minority owned through private equity. And I think for me, the essence of this slide really is that we've made some progress, but there's still a lot more to be done, yeah? There is an importance, and I'll talk a little bit more about capital, but I think it's important that we talk about the importance of having black capital. Because capital has anyone heard of Emoreki? Who's Emoreki, guys? Do you know Emoreki? No, Andrew, you don't know Emoreki. I have 2 questions. What is Emoreki, Andrew?
I've got no clue.
Absolutely no clue. So please, somebody help Andrew out. What is Emoreki? Can I ask? Somebody laughed so high.
No, it's a blesser. I know that.
Aha! Oh, so you know a blesser. A blesser has money in their pockets, and a blesser decides where things are done, how they buy, where they invest, why they invest. And that's the importance of capital. It determines the agenda. I'm a CEO of a business, but I can't wake up one morning and decide, okay, tomorrow I'm opening an office in Pimville, Soweto. I cannot. It's not my money. I'm hired. I have a board. I have to get mandate. I have to give reasons, etc., etc. But if the capital in the company decides, you know what, we believe we want to set up place there, we think there's a good strategy there, they can deploy that. And that's the importance of capital. You are the ultimate moreki. You bless people in terms of where decisions get made. And that's why it's important that we do not dismiss black capital in the country. Even though at the moment it might seem a little misdirected in terms of where it invests, it's critical that we have the time for it to define purpose so that it can actually add to the country. Yeah? So let us not get sidetracked with that. But why is it difficult to make this transition where we actually have that diamond, right? I think it's because it's complex. It's complex. There are challenges with dismantling structures of the past. And if you work in any company, you realize that sometimes you get into a place and you realize, hey, maybe leadership is not quite right. Eh? The reason why you're not getting to places is because the leader just doesn't get it. And so you're 5 years in this project and people are going in and out. And that's partly what also happens in our country, that we've got, not even partly, we're scoring our own goals, yeah, because leadership is just not there. But I think when people ask, but yeah, you know, and they talk about this generally in like passing comments to say, Mara, you guys have had 30 years, man. I mean, like, nothing's really happened in the 30 years. You've had democracy in all that time. What's happened? And I think it's quite right, yes. High levels of corruption. And it's systemic, and it's embarrassing, and it's disgusting, and you wonder what on earth is going on. But you must also remember that people who came into power had nothing. So they came in, and then they had to make the state their pockets, right? And I think we missed the boat when we came into power to say, how do we properly redress? We just kind of said, okay, go in, and we've got political power and we'll see, right? We never addressed the economic issue that we're still faced with today. So we've got this legacy that we've taken from the past and we still haven't solved for it. So this corruption is the underlying issue. But excluding that corruption, when you look at education, for example, there are key issues there in terms of union power, poor quality teaching, all those things. We have land distribution, you have legal limitations, political resistance. There are quite a few other issues besides just the corruption that we mustn't be forgetting and working on to make sure that actually we make a dent in terms of some of the structural issues. But I wanted to take you back. You know, I did history at school because I just didn't get how energy traveled. They lost me when they said that you can measure push and pull. I was out. I was like, this does not make sense. You mean one can measure that? How? So I ducked and I did history, and thank goodness I could figure out the maths in a way. So I thought I'd take you a little bit back in terms of our history, just so that you appreciate just what has happened. And so that when you solve, and taking you back, because I'll tell you one thing, I'm very clear that this is our collective history. We cannot divorce ourselves from it, but we need to understand it so that we make better decisions and move on. And it's not to poke fun and say, yeah, you know, this and that. It's really to really be acutely aware of the dynamics at play and why we need to change. So we had the Dutch. They ended up until 1795. So when Jan van Riebeeck landed here, up until then, they were in charge. And their primary motive was really to look after the ships. Remember, they were looking after ships passing through South Africa. But they were still, if anything, in all the periods up until 1994, they were very much exclusionary. They were very much racist. They were very much about the business of the day being solving for their own constituency, right? And so that happened until 1795, and then we had the British who had like two parts to to their tenure, over 100 years being here. These are the guys who contributed to the migrant system that we know with the discovery of minerals in the country. And having done that, so also them building out for the British Empire, and then they gave power then to the Afrikaners until 1994. I thought in 1994. Yay. It was until 1994. So they were in power for almost 84 years. And they, as we know, established apartheid as we understand it. And that basically dealt with providing capital accumulation to support farmers who are Afrikaners, businesses, as well as preferential treatment to them. So in over 300 years, there was systemic movement to make sure that the majority of the people were excluded from the system. And the structures, whether it's funding, etc., were set up to make sure that you don't. So when you now look at what we're left with in the 30 years that we had the ANC government, because I put it up until 2024 because now we've got the GNU, you have to realize that they were faced with primarily two things. One, to take the whole country forward, to have a common vision for everybody here. And secondly, you have to also remember that there was no black capital in the market to actually now start creating the change. Yeah? And I told you the concept of Moreki and how important that is. So then, what then do we do when at the moment there is talk about broad-based black economic empowerment must die? I think we need to actually entertain every debate with rigor and proper engagement, because I think to say people should not have views is wrong, and to not create an environment of dialogue so that we have a unified vision is also not going to be helpful. So yes, we might, some of us not like it, but I think it's well worth having that conversation. That's why we're a democratic country and we can engage, right? But I think we must recognize the benefits of triple BEE, at least in terms of what it's managed to do. I certainly would not be sitting and standing here had it not been for affirmative action. And it was not affirmative action because I was not good enough. It was affirmative action to make sure that space was created for me to be there. Yeah? So there was policy pressure, which almost forced companies to actually create change. When I did articles, I can tell you one thing. It was not a pleasant thing to do articles. I certainly was one of the very few. In fact, some clients would say they don't want you to come and audit. And when you understand why, it's because of the way you look. Yeah? So I think to dismiss the importance of this legislation to almost the fact that it only benefited some people, perhaps black capital, is not necessarily a very balanced view. The other aspect of it is that, we talk about the black middle class. I think when you look at the joys we've had when there's been economic boom in this country, it was mainly because this happened, right? And so it cannot be a negative thing to actually include more people in the system. It has to actually be really good. And then black industrial support has happened as well, and procurement-driven decisions are also important. And it's amazing how in every company, the conversation around how much you procure from previously disadvantaged companies is an important aspect. Even there, we can still do better, But it actually is because we've had this legislation happening. I want to take you through to a little bit about purposeful investing that has also happened as a result of some of the legislation that we're seeing here. This broad-based element around, ownership, I think has been an interesting one for me to view. Because when you look at the likes of Royal Bafokeng, where actually the deals that they do benefit the community that they belong in, it makes me wonder, could there be an aspect of this morphing into how townships actually also get the benefit? Why, if we're talking about broad-based, are we not maybe talking about communities more? And maybe that's something that we need to think about. Because then, imagine if the community then owns part of that, you can actually start doing things in that community funded by the income generated from this. So I think that's something quite useful to think about. And then the role of black industrialists. I spoke to quite a few of the people that I classified, at least in that space, and they're quietly doing some work. A lot of the asset managers, for example, that are coming through now that are black, are funded by these black industrialists. So again, I think that the definition and purpose for this money is being set. It's not quite how we'd like it to be, maybe loud and pronounced, but I think they're also trying to figure things out. And the funding of black management, of black management to do management buyouts, I think that's critical. Because isn't that what the culmination of this is? We don't just want to buy stakes and just be board members who arrive at a board meeting. We actually want to run these businesses and actually make decisions. So I think that's also a translation of what we want in the economy to happen. So, enablers of purposeful investing. I think banks and DFIs have a huge role to play in terms of enabling this journey. But I think it needs to happen with a different definition of risk. Yeah? And maybe it's not just banks on their own, it's both of them working together, because you have a development aspect and you've got a commercial aspect that needs to be taken into consideration. And then I've spoken about the industrialists, but the role of regulation is so important and needs to be acknowledged. The Competition Commission and the Competition Tribunal have done a superb job of trying to balance all these aspects out. So whenever there's a merger that's being done, there are considerations around making sure that there's competitive elements to be considered before the deal gets signed off, to make sure that you don't have an economy with just big giants and there's no one who can actually enter the economy. So let's talk a little bit about township development. I've given you a little bit of the history. Note, this was not a project where when it was developed to say, okay, good things are going to come out of here. It was developed to make sure that what we see coming out right now, where you have people like me coming out of it, is a mistake. Because the education was meant to be bad. I did Bantu education. I was saved, dragged out, taken somewhere else. But we were fed what was not meant to make us decision makers. And somehow, that we are all here makes it it's a miracle of nature, right? But there is hope here. Imagine, we've got an economy that has developed, and we have to be proud of our economy, by the way. I'm not shooting it down. I'm just portraying the fact that there are two elements to it. One, hugely successful, very modern, very good. But we need to think about this one as well, which is in the background of an already formed economy, if I can put it that way. But think of this. We've got 21 million, just nearly 21 million people sitting in townships, almost 585 townships or so in the country, right? This is the size of a small country. Malawi, I don't think, has as many people as we've got in the townships. Yeah, Rwanda hasn't got as many people as we've got in the townships. This is an economy waiting to happen on its own. And now the question is why? How? When are we going to see this as an opportunity instead of a thing that kind of sits there? I'm always amazed when we as companies go to the rest of Africa to go invest, right? And we leave the rest of Africa right here, where we can actually do something there and cultivate something. But it's not easy, because in this environment, you have a situation where you have unrest, it's unstable, right? And the July unrest cost this country close to 50 billion rand. And 100 million rands of that was lost in education infrastructure. So when we get mad, we destroy. We destroy infrastructure left, right, and center, and then say, yeah, Mara, we don't have the resources. Huh? So there is something that has to change and something that has to be laid in those environments. And so the question is, if I can conclude on the topic of purposeful investing, is how do we do this? It's not about people just going in and throwing money in the townships. It's about building ecosystems. It's about making sure that the role of government is pretty clear. So you need to have police. You need to have insurers, Sasria as an insurer, us as well as likes of Hollard as well. Everybody needs to be part of this thing to make it happen. You need the role of community, people in the community leading, because you cannot have people we know the people who are burning these things. It's about people leading to make sure that something happens. It's about the role of labor to say, how do we actually look at this? Are we all in it? Do we want, if they offered you a job in Soweto, would you say yes? So professionals also we need to do more work with professionals, guiding them, enabling this conversation to be something that is aspirational, yeah? But it all hinges on leadership of our country, because in our country we've made decisions. We said we're a democracy, and so the question I often have when I listen to people talk, I'm like, are you talking just about democracy, or are you talking about the well-being of the people, or are you talking about both? Yeah? And it has to be about both all the time, because that's what we chose. Our Bill of Rights, it ensures that we say in there that it's universal suffrage for adults, so all adults can vote, and there should be regular elections, right? But we also say that there is a right to life. And a right to life talks about quality of life, access to healthcare, etc., etc. So I think any leader in this country, any leader, not just a political leader, any leader should have a vested interest in understanding that's what it takes to lead at a higher level. It's a high-grade leadership. And you guys are all high-grade. We're not just talking about leading just in your department. It's actually recognizing that you are enabling a system. And in what you do, there is impact. Yeah? So we have a very strong constitution that we rely on. But what is our rallying cry? What is this thing that we cling on that says, you know what, we're going to be great in the next 10 years. And we cannot depend on Siya Kolisi and the guys to be nation builders. Every time we destroy things, and just as we're about to crash, they come and they win. Yeah? I'm told I'm running out of time, so I've got to make it quick. The reality is that democracy doesn't shield us. Just having democracy doesn't shield us, because democracy leads to also leaders like Trump being voted in, and decisions that in the UK they didn't like, where Brexit happened. Yeah? And everybody was wondering how Ubaba ended up being voted. It's because democracy reigns. When you don't deliver on what people require, they will listen to those people that say something that sounds like they can deliver. Yeah, so the only way in which we can reconcile the interests of the majority and the minorities to bring it all together is to deliver on what we promise. The role of society, I don't want to stress too much. I've spoken about it. I just want to conclude by just saying that, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. And that's what we all need to realize in the next couple of years. And to conclude on the heart of leadership, I think it's important to understand, one, we need a common vision. Two, we need to have integrity, leaders who actually make decisions that are right when no one is watching, not when everybody is watching. They need to be empathetic. You can't see people dying. You can't see people not sitting in long queues in hospitals and not be empathetic to act. You need to be courageous, especially when it involves your friends and family, to say, actually, no, we're not going to do this because this is the right thing to do. And the act of service, which involves making sure that as leaders, we change the trajectory of the future of our country. And that's where I'll end, guys. I know I've taken a bit of time, but thank you so much.
Wow, that's all I have to say. And I hope that you have some burning questions for Miss Angela. And we do apologize for the time. We are going to extend the masterclass to 9:10 so that we can at least fit in a few questions. All right, but before we get into that, Joshua, are you ready for us?
No.
All right, so
After the Q&As.
let's get into the Q&A session. All right, so questions. The floor is open. And please wait, somebody will come and give you the mic. All right, so the first one, and we will take 2 questions at a time.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Angela. I'm looking at South Africa. It's a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only African country in BRICS. So then how do we then maneuver as young people, young leaders, into the transformation space? I heard you talking about transformation. Everything, your presentation was transformation, but transformation is not change, but a process of change. As a young person, I'm working for a company. I'm too transformational. I come from a township in Harangua. Then I get my CEO. They're not too transformational, but they preach transformation. We have triple BEE policies. We have elements of triple BEE, skills development, enterprise and supply development. Skills development, all they do is for points. They enroll learners, young people into learnerships. What happens next year? 12 months, what happens next year? There's years for youth employment. You give us the skills, but what happens after that? So we have Agenda 2030, 4 years to Agenda 2030. What's going to happen to us? Yes, we are too transformational, we are young leaders, but how do we then maneuver to Agenda 2030? How do you, as corporates, maneuver with us as young leaders in your companies? So I just want to find out that, yes, we do it for impact. Our influence is for impact, but transformation is a struggle. If we have bosses, our employers who are not too transformational. So my question is, how do we then maneuver to Agenda 2030? Are we 50% to Agenda 2030, or we are still on 10%, and then we're gonna blame it on democracy? No, we are not there. But I want to understand, how do we then maneuver? We have Henley Business School Africa. South Africa must be the
I think this is a serious issue, right? And I think it's something, again, to your point, we can tick boxes, or we can actually say, how do we address this key issue? I know that for me, learnerships are not just for me to give you a skill for 12 months and then you go out. And we tell our learners that, you know what, you've got an opportunity for a job. Okay? And what we're going to do is train you. And I speak with confidence that over 80% of the people that come in end up actually getting a job. Yeah? So I think, again, my sister, it goes back to the heart of leadership. And that has to be something that as leaders and personally, how can I put it in a nice way? I debate with leaders around their heart. Because Because you can do everything, just kind of like, it's a job. Like, you know, when some of, I hope none of you, get to work and you're like, I'm just working, yeah. It doesn't end just because you're a leader, eh? There's some leaders who are just ticking boxes for the reasons that you maybe also know you're ticking boxes. But what we're wanting to create, and that's why you have the likes of Henry, where there has to be a conversation about what it means to be a leader in this country. There has to be an urgency around solving problems for this country. Because you can also qualify, ne? And just all you're worried about is me, myself, and I. Come weekend, it's just me, myself, and I am going to chill, and that's it. I mentioned in the video, there was a medic student. Every weekend he came to teach us. Every weekend. Why was he giving up his time? He had a vision. How many of us here contribute our time and effort to building somebody else? We're too busy. Yeah? But somebody else must. So this thing is about everybody in the system shifting, making a different effort. I've got 2 people in my team. They look after orphans. We had a careers day. They brought, each one of them brought 10 people each. Because that's what is in their heart, right? So what do you do? And the one guy only has matric. And guess what? He's a permanent employee. Why did we make him a permanent employee? Because he showed up. Yeah? So for me, it's really this journey of, one, hearts of leaders in this country needs to be elevated to understand the real problem to solve. And 2, the people in the system also need to pull up as they rise so that you're not the only one getting there. The problem is being the only one there. You don't get support. Yeah? I hope it kind of answers. So not yet there, but we need to all change.
All right. Thank you so much. Can we go for the next question?
Thanks, Angela. You may have answered my question, but my question is 2-part. I wanted to ask you in the rise, because I think in as much as you are presenting this masterclass of being a leader, I wanted to ask you, what were the things in your journey and projects or things that you kind of saw and you wanted to, or you had that heart of leadership, and how can we, moving from today and from this session, identify those type of places, people, communities around us? How can, like, I want to ask the how. How do we implement everything that you've said today into our daily lives, in our small little clusters, in the people that we have around us? How do we learn? How do we do it?
That's such a beautiful question. Eh? I'll tell you what, I've never been the ideal leader. Like, if you look at me, how I talk, and I should not be sitting in anybody's boardroom. Huh? I don't have gravitas in that way, I don't. But what I was very privileged to be given when I was raised was that I'm a human being. You know, with every degree we got, we were told, you're a human being first. And the rest is everything else. And that has taught me something, that I'm no different to you, that actually my pain is your pain, that I can be easily scared and, you know. So the elements of being human has allowed me to actually navigate this place, and I'll explain why. One, I've never assumed I'm too less to become anything. I've always believed I can. It's just sometimes I need to get an opportunity. And because of my dad, who used to say, you sweep last for your boss, eh? They mustn't come find your place a mess. I've always been the one who does the most. You know, they give me a task, I'll go to the nth degree to make it work. Faiza was telling me we're the only masterclass with a video. But that's a mindset. For me, it's like, if I'm asked to do something, I don't want to be the one who makes Andy look bad. Eh? I don't want that. So for me, it's like, even when I was doing private equity, my past was also private equity. I used to leave at 12 o'clock at night.
Why? I didn't have children. I didn't have a husband. I was like, I know I'm going to have those things, but in this time, I'm going to stretch myself to the max. So whenever there was a project, I'd be like, me. You know, so I learned, I don't know half the things I've learned where I learned them from, except from raising my hand and being that person. And then the other thing is when I get to work, I never forget that I'm there to serve. I think people arrive at work and they forget, they now they have a job, they're now better than anybody, right? So for me, I look and I'm like, okay, how do I serve the ones up there? What is their agenda? How do I serve the ones here like me? And how do I make sure that the ones below me get the benefit? And so I have always been found to be a leader who's been inclusive and allows people to grow. And I actually generally just think, be a nice person. Not nice in like doormat, but just be kind. Like, why do we have to be dealing with you because you're ugly with people? And just because you've got a promotion, now we've got an issue, right? It's things like that. And strangely, I never anticipated to be where I am. I just think a lot of grace along the way. Things open. As you do the right thing, how you don't realize this other door opens and another door opens. I know you don't quite see it that way from where you're sitting. But just imagine an Angela who was sitting playing Zwippy outside her dad's shop, that she'd be standing here. No, absolutely not. So I think it's a series of making the right kind of choices, decisions, and just being honestly a good human being. Somehow you'll find others that match that. Yeah? And if you don't, you're very quick to say, Wena, I don't want to work for you, and you exit. Done.
Delegates, my fellow leaders, I have to apologize immensely. We are out of time and we cannot take any further questions. But before I conclude, I just want to echo some of the lessons that we have picked up from Ms. Angela's presentation. And firstly, it's leading, keeping in mind you're a human, right? Secondly, it's with intention, it's with purpose, and lastly, with heart. And Ms. Angela here has given us a great example of what it takes to be a true leader. Everybody, a huge round of applause. And thank you so much.